Today I want to tell a little bit about Police Precinct, a cooperative game that was released recently. It can play solitaire, it can play multiplayer. In this game, the players take on the role of policemen that are responding to emergencies that happen around town. All sort of emergencies, bank robberies, bad stuff, different levels of evil. At the same time, however, in their quote-unquote free time, the policemen need to investigate a murder. Yes, there is a murderer on the loose in town, and the murderer is going to leave town soon. So actually, the policemen only have a limited amount of time to solve the case and to capture the murderer before it is too late. Because if the murderer leaves town, then the players lose the game. And again, at the same time, they're still responding to things that happen. Punks congregate to form gangs. The city always seems at risk of being overwhelmed by a wave of criminality and bad stuff happening. Well, this is a general idea. Let me show you how the game works.
This is the board for the game, which is a very large board. When you also take into account the fact that you have other displays that you need to place around, tokens, cards, things like that, it is a game that takes up quite some space. But the map looks good, the game is good, so it's all good. Here you have a general look of the map. The areas around the map that I'm showing you may not look very exciting because I'm filming from the basement of my in-laws, but at least I have the time to film because I have support from the in-laws for other stuff. In any case, the map is divided in streets and in urban areas with buildings and things like that. The streets are represented by these rectangular areas that you see here. The squares that connect the streets do not count as streets, so the cars move simply from street to street. And then the streets, of course, border locations that you can enter if you are in the street that has an arrow that points to the location in which you're going. Commonville has, of course, many types of locations: stores, cafes, a general hospital, a police station. This is the area where you can purchase upgrades for your character if you are in the correct area and you spend an action to do so. And this is why I place the upgrade tokens there. The characters represent officers of the law that will travel around town on cars. Each player has one such car represented by a token that is double-sided. On one side you have a patrol car, you see that there, and on the other side there is an unmarked car. Patrol cars go faster in the traffic, but the good thing about unmarked cars is that they're better to investigate. You attract less attention. You simply will draw more cards from the investigation decks, and I will tell you what that is, what those are later. Several types of cards and extra cards will go on the board. One such card is emergency cards. Several times in the game, many times in the game actually, bad stuff will happen, and to represent that, emergency cards will be placed on the board. You will need to pass a test in order to remove a card. If cards stay too long on the board, that is bad for you. Also here, the policemen are trying not just to take care of the emergencies that happen in the city, in any day of the life of the city, but also trying to apprehend the murderer. In order to do that, they have to investigate several things about the crime that was committed. And to do so, the players need to find the right cards in the investigation decks that are placed on the board. You need to go to a location where an investigation deck is. For example, you have the interview witness deck there. And then there are procedures that allow you to go through the deck and to try to see if you can find the cards that you need. Each investigation deck is made, for the most part, of useless cards and some cards that are clues. You need to collect the right clues. There are only a certain amount of cards that you can draw each turn, but there are also game effects that allow you to manipulate the deck so that you can increase your chances of finding the cards that you need. You have the interview witness deck, as you can see there. There you have the morgue, where you find the examine body. We have another emergency there, and you can see that there is a token on it, unknown circumstances, that modifies the card. And you do not know what's under there, what the arsonist has up his sleeve. Here we have another investigation deck, from which we're trying to retrieve the murder weapon, and then we have the crime scene evidence. As we are here, look who's there! Punks in a bed hood. As you can see, that's bed hood number 4, even though it is upside down. Yes, punks are those things, well, here punks represent those types of enemies that pop out all the time in many co-op games, and if too many of them are on the board, is bad. Here there are several ways in which punks will be added to the board, mainly through event cards, but also at the beginning of the game you roll dice and you add the punks to the board. The more punks you have in a neighborhood, in a bad hood, the harder it is to defeat them, the harder it is to remove them. If you ever find yourself in need of adding new punks to the board and you do not have enough of those available in the stockpile that is outside of the board, then it is bad. You do not lose the game like it happens in other games, but it is still fairly bad. And here we have the turn track. This is the game. This game, as you see, is set up for 3 players, and as you can see in this case, the turn marker does not go on the first space on the turn track. The more players you have, the less turns you have, so you have to place the marker closer to the end of the game. In turn 16, that marker that you see there, they place there as a reminder, is placed on the board. That is the murderer. That's him. That's the guy that you're trying to apprehend. He is placed in area 6 of the board. There are 6 main areas, 6 blocks pretty much. And the murderer, once he's on the board, in the last turns of the game, will then move once per turn from hood to hood. This is from 6 to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Trust me, there's a 1 there. And if the murderer manages to move from location number 1, that means that the murderer has left the town and you lose the game. In order to win the game, you need to collect enough evidence to apprehend the guy and then to actually catch him, to actually grab him as he is on the board. To win the game, you need to go through those decks that I showed you earlier, and you need to look for the right cards. Again, murder weapon, witness statements, crime scene evidence, and autopsy reports. That may take some time, and this is pretty much the way in which you win the game, by apprehending the murderer. There are, however, 2 ways of losing the game. One is if the murderer leaves the game, and the other one is if the Comaville crime track skyrockets and the marker on that track goes to the fail space, which can happen in several ways. There are several actions that if you fail to perform, or if those happen, then the marker goes up 1 box on that track. For example, if you need to add punks to the board and you do not have any available, that is what happens there. If certain emergencies stay on the board for too long, that also increases the level of crime, stuff like that. Each character in the game is represented by a card, such as this one, with some unique abilities, or in any case special abilities, described on the card, with instructions, and the instructions will tell you when you can use the ability and what the ability can do for you. Also, each character has 3 stats: investigation, arrest, and emergency. That is, the ability to arrest prisoners, to arrest criminals, to respond to emergencies, and to investigate crimes. Each player also has a hand of police cards, each with a symbol in the top right corner, matching one with 3 stats, and then an effect described at the bottom of the card. Now, what do you do with your character during your turn? Well, here we have a good player aid. First, you move your car 2 spaces if you are driving an unmarked car, up to 3 spaces if you're driving a patrol car, and then you perform an action from a list of possible things. Are you close to one of those investigation decks? Then you draw a number of cards equal to your investigation value. This guy, for example, 1. +1 if you're in an unmarked car, so it would have 2 cards. And then there are other ways of increasing that. There are game effects that can do that. Other players can help you by playing They're police cards that match, that have a symbol that matches the skill that you're trying to use. In this case, if a player plays a card for that, you ignore the effect at the bottom. You simply look at the symbol. So if all of these things manage to get together, unmarked card, this thing, and this symbol, then the player would be able to draw 3 cards. If there are clues among those cards, hooray, good for you. If not, that is bad, because you will eliminate one of the useless cards, remove it from the deck, but after that you have to shuffle the deck. Yep, that's it. You don't simply put those cards at the bottom as you thought you would have to do. That was your thought. I know it was my thought too. You reshuffle the deck. Unless your character has the thorough ability, this character doesn't have it, but if a character has the thorough ability, then the character doesn't need to reshuffle the deck. This is why you really need to use game effects between investigations to manipulate the deck to increase your chances that the cards that you need will be right there, will be on top of the deck. You can arrest the street punks or the murderer if you are again in an area adjacent to those. In this case, you look at your arrest number, and that number indicates the number of dice that you roll. Again, there are ways to increase that. There are patrol officers that can help you. Those are markers that are placed in certain circumstances. That players can play cards. Several ways of doing this. Once you have the final number, you roll the dice, and you look at the numbers that equal or exceed the numbers of punks that are in the street. For example, there are 4 punks in the street where you're trying to arrest some punks. Then you score a hit, quote unquote, you score a hit with a 4 or more. There are 3 punks, you need 3 or more. Each die that scores a hit removes a punk. If you eliminate at least 3 punks, you gain a donut, which is a generic resource represented by a marker, and that can be spent in a variety of ways. Donuts are delicious, and in this game are very important. Emergency, this is the skill that allows you to remove emergency cards from the board, or at least to try to remove them. Each emergency card, as you may remember, has a number printed on it. That's the number that you need to equal or exceed with at least 1 die. You roll a number of dice equal to your emergency skill plus modifications, cards played by players, game effects. You just try to get as many dice as possible. In this case, if at least one of your dice shows a 5, then you pass the test. You also gain the reward that you see here. You can remove the card. That way the card does not trigger bad stuff happening on the crime level track. And if you fail, sometimes nothing happens, sometimes bad stuff happens. For example, in this case, if the attempt to handle fails, the active player is sent to the hospital, and the active player discards 2 cards. You can upgrade your character, purchasing upgrades. You can draw a police card. You can reveal yourself as a dirty cop to accuse another player of being a dirty cop, only if you're playing with the dirty cop variant, which just means the variant with the traitor. After you have performed your action, you draw a police card, and that is good. And then you draw an event card, and that is bad. That is what makes bad stuff happen in the game. As you can see, in reality, it is a pretty straightforward turn sequence, and the game is pretty simple to play. It is definitely light on the rules, but very heavy on the theme, which is a good combo, I think.
Now, this game may not reinvent co-op gaming as we know it. Many of the ideas that you see here, you have seen them in other co-op games. The idea of bad stuff being added to the board until it reaches a critical mass and then things become really bad. Pandemic, Defenders of the Realm. The deck of cards that generates bad events. I think almost every co-op has it. The idea that you can work with other players and give them resources from your stockpile of resources. That we've seen that too. Is this a bad thing? Not at all. I mean, there are many mechanics that we see in a lot of games, like rolling dice and moving things on the board. Mechanics travel from game to game, and it is never a matter of the mechanic is just there, but how is the mechanic used, how does it go together with the other mechanics of the game and with the theme. And all these things work well here. So, the game may be reminiscent of other games, but these mechanics now come together with a theme that, as far as I know, was not represented in co-op gaming yet. A lot of fantasy games with a co-op idea, some horror, some other stuff, but police investigations, law enforcement, realistic types of criminals, realistic types of emergencies that you have to respond to. This is a refreshing theme to see expressed through these mechanics. The game is intense, a lot of options, a lot of things that you can do, a lot of decisions that are tough. Nevertheless, the game is pretty simple to play. I think you can easily introduce any player to the game. The idea is really that you move and you execute an action, and there are different ways, slight different ways in which you can boost your chances of succeeding, of passing a test. So the investigation test is slightly different from other types of tests, but those are small things. This is definitely a game that is very approachable, easy to teach, easy to play, not easy at all to win. I lost all the games that I played but one, and even that one I'm not sure I won. Thinking about it, I think I may have made some mistakes along the line, and I may have cheated inadvertently without knowing it. So I may have won a game, but I'm not sure. Even that, I was very close to losing the game. So the game is tough. If it's not tough enough, you can make it tougher by modifying things, shortening the turn track, for example, even more. That's gonna make things almost impossible. The theme shines through the mechanics. The mechanics come together well. The experience is fun. I played the game solitaire only, but I played it with different teams and teams of different sizes. Each configuration of experts in the team and each size of team presented different advantages and disadvantages, different challenges and ways in which you could use resources and abilities. Each game was fun, each game was different. That is to say, pretty much, that you can play it with different amounts of players, not just of characters, and I think that the game will work very well. Police Precinct is a game that I enjoyed, a game that I have no problem recommending to anybody who is interested in the theme or interested in co-op gaming in general, or just interested in seeing a fun narrative developing through game mechanics with a topic that is contemporary and has a realistic feel to it. Fun game. I really recommend it.